Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. I'm super pumped. This is an interview that's literally 4 months in the making now. I was on Brett Curry's podcast at some point last year, and he just happened to mention that he specializes in, well, a lot of stuff, but YouTube for e-commerce. And what I know of YouTube is I have taken a YouTube course for consultants, but not for e-commerce, which is a completely different beast. And through the iOS 14 update coming out, a lot of companies, a lot of entrepreneurs are really looking for multi-channel marketing and diversifying where they advertise. And YouTube has always been a question that comes up in client strategy meetings. So I'm super pumped to have Brett Curry here from OMG Commerce, and just really having a conversation about YouTube ads for e-commerce specifically, and what are some best practices, what are some great companies and resources that you could tap into if you are looking to either hire OMG Commerce to do your YouTube advertising or play around with this yourself. So Brett, I'm really pumped to have you here.
Hey, Khierstyn, thanks for having me on. And yes, it was 4 months or more in the making.
It was like,
but
it was a
hopefully
blur.
it'll be totally worth it. I'm excited to be here. And
Yeah.
so, yeah, ready to rock and roll.
Let's do it. So what I really love is that, when you get into digital advertising, I think that you need to take advice from someone who specializes in the niche that you're in. So it's not just about YouTube ads, but specific to e-commerce. And before we jump into like the tactical how-to side, I'd love to know, like, how did you get into e-commerce? How did you start doing media buying online and now running an agency that helps people do this?
Yeah, so I'll give you a little bit of background, but I promise to not bore people too much, right? So
Let's do
in
it.
the early days, I did some TV and radio. So in college, I started doing some traditional media and then started a small ad agency, did some TV production and TV buying, and really fell in love with TV, right?
Yeah.
And then early on, kind of got interested in YouTube, but in the early days, YouTube was mainly just like an organic play, for SEO and stuff.
Yeah.
Then when my business partner, Chris Brewer, and I started OMG in 2010, we were doing SEO and paid search and web. We were like doing everything, just trying to figure out what we were good at.
Yeah.
And really nailed, or kind of zeroed in on paid search and Google Shopping. And we got a couple of e-commerce clients. I just fell in love with it. Like, fell in love with first the data, like being able to see end to end. Here's the ad click, here's the behavior on the site, here's the purchase, here's the amount, all of that.
Yeah.
Versus lead gen of some kind where you saw you generated a lead, but did it close and for how much? And what was the performance? It was hard to tell. Mm-hmm. So we fell in love with the data first of e-commerce, and then we realized, hey, we're kind of good at this, right? And so yeah. I kind of obsessed with Google Shopping. I ended up writing the ultimate guide to Google Shopping that Shopify published, and started speaking about Google Shopping. Anyway, then we're like, hey, let's try YouTube, right? And I had all this video background and TV background, and so started dabbling in YouTube, and it worked pretty well.
Yeah.
But then YouTube came out with a platform called TrueView for Action, where you could bid to try to get conversions, and when that happened, it's like everything changed. So it's kind of the marrying of my multiple worlds of TV and paid search kind of coming together in this new YouTube ad format. So it was like 4 or 5 years ago maybe, and since then, we've become one of the biggest YouTube ad spenders in the e-commerce space, and I've seen a lot of companies go from zero in YouTube spend to 10 to 20,000 a day in YouTube ad spend profitably.
Yeah.
And so it's a fantastic platform. So really, really excited about it.
And I find that Facebook really takes the cake for, it's one of the main advertising platforms that e-com, different brands and stuff use. And part of the value of Facebook is how developed it is, I guess, and how well you can target. Would you say that YouTube is pretty mature on the targeting side, or is it still pretty hit or miss with that?
Yeah, it's a great question. So I think in some ways, and I'm a YouTube guy, right? I don't know Facebook well. I certainly understand the basics of Facebook and know some of the best Facebook ad people in the world, like Molly Pittman and Ezra Firestone, both personal friends of mine, but I'm a YouTube guy. I think in some ways, scaling on Facebook is easier in the beginning, right? I think there's actually more scale opportunity on YouTube. It's a bigger platform.
Yeah.
There's a few pieces that are more challenging, namely like the creative, the ads
Yeah.
are a little more challenging on YouTube than on Facebook. You can really start small on Facebook with a very basic ad and can maybe do really well, where YouTube, it's a little different. It doesn't have to be an expensive ad, but there are nuances. We can get into that. But in terms of audiences, I actually like some of YouTube's audience targeting opportunities better than what you have on Facebook. So I'll give you a couple of examples. One is you can build an audience based on what people are searching for on Google and on YouTube.
Yeah.
So that's one key data set that Google has that Facebook doesn't. What are people actively searching for?
Yeah.
And that's a really strong intent signal. So it's called a custom intent audience, but basically you're giving Google a list of keywords, and then they're building an audience of people that have recently searched for those keywords on Google and on YouTube. So like that's an awesome audience.
Yeah.
On Facebook, the lookalike audience is kind of like king, and from what I hear.
Yep.
Yeah. That's hit or miss. So Google has a version of that called a similar to audience, where you upload a list of converters, via your email list, or you connect to Google Analytics and say, hey, this is a list of buyers. Google will then build a similar to audience, which is their version of a lookalike audience.
Yeah.
It's hit or miss. It's kind of sometimes it does great, sometimes it's oddly terrible. It's weird. It does look like Google's getting better at it. So we get to see kind of this new beta version that they're coming out with. It looks awesome. Yeah. But for now, the similar to audience is a little bit hit or miss. But then a lot of the other options like interest-based targeting and all the detailed demographic stuff, if you can build an audience on Facebook, you can likely build a similar audience on YouTube. Yeah. Nobody knows more about us as shoppers than Facebook and Google. Yeah. So there's lots of good options there as far as audience building.
Yeah, because we work with two kinds of campaigns. We work with either lead generation campaigns, which is if you have an upcoming product launch and you need to build an email list of people who are interested in your product, versus actively driving traffic to purchase a product. This comes down to which platform is better for you, and I'm leading with the question in a second. But with Facebook, it's easy to, and that's our main platform for lead gen campaigns, because you can target based on interest. People interested in breastfeeding or following certain brands, right? Whereas the difference, you said it earlier, with high intent. So Google and YouTube allows you to target people based on intent, which is why when you have a product pre-launch, and maybe you can correct me here, but we only use Google retargeting for lead generation campaigns, because if someone isn't searching for your solution, or even if they are and they can't buy it for 4 months, the conversions can't be that good. So I'm curious, like YouTube, Google, obviously great for driving traffic to an active site when someone is actively looking for a solution to purchase, high intent. But have you seen YouTube work for lead generation campaigns?
So we don't do a lot on the lead generation side. So we're just trying to capture, a lead for a future product launch. I think that could work really well. We'll talk about that more in just a second. I know a lot of people that promote info courses and other things, and all they're doing is lead gen, coaching, and YouTube is really powerful for that. I have less experience in that realm. We did some work in the sports training
that makes sense.
Industry for lead gen, and it worked very well. But it was also one of those things where we were still targeting mainly based on keywords. Now, the beautiful thing about Google is, though, you don't have to focus on keywords. So Google also will build, in-market audiences, which those are kind of a close cousin to custom intent, where Google says, hey, you're in the market for financial services, or you're in the market for a used automobile or something like that. But then you can get into interest and affinity-based audiences. So one of the things that you can do, there's what's called a custom affinity audience, where basically you give Google a list of URLs, could be your competitors, could be sites related to your product category or something like that. I really like the competitor angle. Yeah. And then basically what Google does with that is they build a lookalike audience from those URLs. Yeah. So they look at the demographics, they look at the behavior, they look at the interests, the affinities of typical visitors to those URLs, and then they build an audience around that. Those audiences usually have a lot of scale. They're usually very large. So probably, you're right, like a specific custom intent audience where someone's looking, I want to buy this new, breastfeeding, whatever, like they want to buy it right now. So if the launch isn't in 4 months, probably not the best lead. But something that's more affinity based, that could be a good audience for launches or lead gen. And even for products, like we find the most scale with affinity-based, interest-based audience than we do intent-based audiences.
Gotcha. Yeah, that's interesting. So when it comes to YouTube, for someone considering YouTube as a platform, what is one thing they have to consider?
Yeah, so I mean, the first thing is the ad is different, right? The way you structure the video ad is different from other platforms. So I know on Facebook you can get by with no video, right? It can be an image and compelling copy above it. You can run more of like a Giphy type video where it's really short and just kind of plays on loop. Like a couple friends of mine run a coffee business, and so their top performing ad is almost like food porn, right? Like it's got like chocolate cake and they're pouring chocolate sauce on it. And it's got the cup of coffee, but it's just like, makes me hungry to even talk about it.
It just looks so good. Yeah.
It looks so good. Yeah. That ad wouldn't work on YouTube, right? Because with YouTube, there's not a copy block around it. Right? It's just the video. So the video has to do all the work. So the video is really, YouTube ads are really similar to direct response TV ads. That's the closest comparison that I can think of. So we're finding like 1.5 to 3.5 minute videos are ideal for conversions. You can run shorter ads and they'll have usually high engagement. Yeah. But if you're trying to drive someone to sign up or to purchase, you need more because you've got to tell enough of the story, right? Like you got to build the problem solution premise and you have to highlight the benefits and you have to just kind of make it come to life. You have to demonstrate the product and show that it works. You have to show some social proof, with testimonials and before and afters and things like that. And so the ad is different and you need to understand the ad. Now, it does not have to be an expensive ad. So you don't have to, you don't have to spend $100,000 creating an ad. I know several people that have shot successful videos with iPhones or spent a few $1,000s on an ad, versus tens of thousands. But the ad is different. I'm happy to unpack any more of that you would like, but you can't usually take an existing Facebook ad and translate it exactly to YouTube. You have to add to it usually and tweak it and change the opening and things like that.
Yeah, and so we do a lot of video in terms of creating product videos for Kickstarter and stuff. That is your 2 to 3 minute pitch video. So it's staged into get the hook, tell the big problem solution, showcase the product, show everything you just mentioned. Would that make a good YouTube video, like that format, the 8 point? Yeah.
So just hearing what you said, yes, I think it would. So typically, a couple things about YouTube videos. The first 5 seconds is critical, right? So you've got that. The types of ads we run, they're the skippable TrueView for action ads. So people have to watch the first 5 seconds. After that, they can skip. The beautiful part is if someone skips before 30 seconds, or before the end of the video, if the video is less than 30 seconds, then you as an advertiser don't pay for that view. So that's why it's called a true view. Yeah. So you want to present enough in the first 5 seconds to really hook the right person, right? So it can't be like this slow build up where it's all mystery and you have really no idea what's going on. You're just trying to get some intrigue or curiosity to keep someone watching. Like you need to hook people the right way. Yeah. And so maybe the first 5 seconds needs to be tweaked a little bit for YouTube. We found, leading with a thought-provoking question or a thought-provoking statement or leading with a powerful testimonial. Like we work with this company that does hair regrowth, and there's a great testimonial on one of their videos where it's this lady facing the camera and the first words out of her mouth are, "This was a bald spot," right? And then she goes, "But it's not a bald spot now. Her hair's beautiful." And then it goes into she tells her story and the before and after and stuff. But it's like, hey, if I'm worried about my hair thinning, then I'm gonna maybe watch that video. So but that hook is really, really critical, and it's important to hook the right person. And you almost want a person who's not a good prospect. You kind of want them to skip, right? Because then you don't pay for it, and they're not likely to convert anyway. So it's okay if they skip. So
that makes sense.
So yeah, you want to hook. You want to lead with the strongest benefit. You want to demonstrate the product, show it in action. You want some kind of proof elements. So reviews, testimonials, awards, little bits of science. It's got to be fun and interesting. It can't be boring like a research paper. And then kind of, some kind of way to reverse the risk, so, and then a call to action, right? So probably a lot of those elements are in the videos you're talking about. Yeah. The only thing I might add to it is, so the length of video sounds similar, like 1.5 to 3.5 minutes. pace may need to change a little bit. So
Okay.
the pace on a YouTube ad needs to be a little faster than what you may be creating in a video for Kickstarter. I'm just guessing. I don't know.
That makes sense. Hey, so YouTube's come out with their premium version, which allows people to skip ads.
Yeah.
And if you look at someone in the mindset, they've clicked the video they want to watch, and the YouTube ad is like interruption marketing. Mm-hmm. Have you seen, since YouTube has come in with premium, like any decrease in engagement, or has it affected advertising performance at all?
It hasn't, and I don't really expect it to. We'll see, but YouTube has experienced such tremendous growth, even since just the lockdowns, a year ago plus. I know some organic channel owners that, during the initial stay-at-home orders, their organic views were up 100 to 200%. I've been speaking on YouTube now for about 4 or 5 years, and remember just a couple years ago, the stats were, 1 billion monthly logged in users. Now it's 2 billion, right? And that's globally, but I mean, the numbers are just astronomical. If you look at, even just anecdotally, like look at what are kids watching, for my kids, like if they're given, hey, it's screen time, go watch what you want. I mean, within reason, we do
of course.
monitor that a little bit. Yeah. But they usually want to watch YouTube, like YouTube stars. So my son, who's 18, he's living on his own, but in this apartment with guys, it's streaming services and YouTube. Like they will likely never be cable subscribers ever. Probably none of my kids will ever be cable subscribers. Yeah. So YouTube is growing at a fantastic clip. Yeah. I think there's always going to be enough of the people that are not on premium that's going to be effective. So if anything, we've seen an inventory increase just because YouTube continues to grow. But that's an interesting question. I don't know what's going to happen with premium, but so far no impact.
Okay. And brands that are serious about YouTube, because YouTube is exploding. It's like, it's online TV. It's exploding. It's really an underused advertising platform still, in my opinion.
Totally.
Do you see value, and what kind of value, for a brand that advertises on YouTube to actively be putting out YouTube content on their channel and be growing their organic side as well as just ads? Like, what's the benefit of really going all in on YouTube that way? Yeah,
it's a fantastic question. And so your first point, YouTube is underutilized. I 100% agree. Yeah. Just before lockdown, so last February, I got invited to the YouTube LA offices, and I was giving a talk to a bunch of e-commerce brands, and it was at YouTube, and I was talking YouTube ads for e-commerce, and I just polled the room, how many of you are actively running YouTube ads, and it was like 30%. So 70% of the people in that audience were not using YouTube ads. And then if you go to another event, it's even less, like 10, 20% of people are actively using it. So I think that's good because, one, we know that everyone's on YouTube. Yeah. But there's still a lot of your competitors probably aren't using YouTube as an ad platform, so that's an opportunity for you. So that's kind of the first piece. And then as far as the organic strategy goes, so I'm not an organic YouTube guy, so I want to preface what I'm about to say with that.
Cool.
I did interview, though, and she was fantastic, Liz Germain.
Yep.
She's an organic YouTube expert, so quick shameless plug, I do have a podcast. Khierstyn was on it. She crushed it. But there's an episode, I don't remember the number, where I interview Liz Germain, and she talks about her organic YouTube strategy. It's a really fun listen, and so that's educational. Okay. But I think you could go either way. So we have a lot of advertisers that don't touch organic, right? They're scaling on YouTube. They're spending $300,000 a month on YouTube ads, don't touch organic at all. And it doesn't slow down their ad performance. Mm-hmm. I know other advertisers that they like creating content, and they've got the team to create content, and they can create stuff that's fun and engaging and that really suits their audience. And so they are creating organic content. Yeah. So I think if you can do it, it's great. The organic play is a little more of a slow build. Yep. That's all based on engagement and watch time, and it's more of a slow build. Once you build momentum, though, it's very powerful. Yeah. A couple things I will mention, though, and this is just what I've learned from Liz and from others, is that if you've got a video that you want to rank organically, you probably don't want to send ad traffic to it, because the number one metric that YouTube is looking for is watch time. So how much are people engaging with this video? Yeah. And if you start sending a bunch of ad traffic to a video, almost certainly the engagement is going to go down. Yeah.
That makes sense.
So I think they can complement each other, though. There's one metric you can see in your YouTube ad campaigns, and it's called earned views, which just means someone that first saw your ad, that they go back and watch other videos. And so that can usually be a decent amount of people. So, I mean, if you have a well built out channel and you're engaged in ads, then you're going to get some bleed over. Some people are going to go back and watch some of your other videos. So I think YouTube as an organic channel is amazing.
Yeah.
But I think the two strategies can be independent and often mostly are independent.
Yeah, that makes sense. Because whereas where you're running ads on Facebook through a Facebook page and people can click the page and, you know, follow social media, I guess it's like, is the YouTube ad kind of linked to your YouTube channel so they can click through and see? Like, I haven't seen.
There is a way, but the way the ads are designed, the call to action buttons, or if someone just clicks on the video, it takes them to your landing page.
Yeah.
So
there you go.
You kind of have to work to get back to the channel. So that's another reason why, like, have a channel that's got no organic content, you'll probably be fine. It's more about, is the video compelling, and does it tell the right story, and does your landing page work? Because 99 point whatever percent of people are only going to see the video and then click to your ad. Usually that earned view metric is someone coming back to YouTube looking for you.
Gotcha.
So it's going to be a small percentage. Yeah.
Okay, awesome. And I'd love to go back to the barrier to entry. I think there's an incorrect barrier to, or perceived barrier to entry on YouTube, because people see Poopery, where Poopery spent, or Squatty Potty, these two viral videos that hired Harmon Brothers, spent $100,000 or whatever on that video, and they just think, wow, I don't have the budget to create a video like that. Do you think it is possible for people to create videos, DRTV videos on their iPhone and still have it convert as well as some of the other ones?
Yeah, I 100% I believe that you can start with a much lower production value than Poopery or Squatty Potty, and those are both fantastic examples. They're great.
But they're
there's
so
a lot
high
we can
end.
learn from the Harmon.
Yeah,
but they're very high end. But there's a lot we can learn from that, right? The opening of those videos. Now the Harmon Brothers use video or humor, and they also use kind of some shock and awe, right? The Squatty Potty has the cute little petite British girl sitting on a public toilet, in a dress.
Yeah.
Like
Oh no!
Shocks you.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and so you don't have to take that same approach, but you do have to get attention. But you can get attention by being more straightforward or more direct. So we had an automotive client. This automotive client spent $1.5 million to $2 million a year on YouTube and growing. And their most successful videos were all before and after pictures that their customers took pictures of. So their customers took these pictures and sent them to the client, and iPhone video walkthroughs of the car, like showing the before and after and stuff like that. Then those were just edited together. So there was nice editing, but it's something like, hey, you could find a video editor to do this and it wouldn't cost you a fortune for sure. Added some superimposed text, right? So text kind of highlighting what we were seeing, the words before, the words after, bringing in a couple key points that the people were saying. And those ads, we call it a UGC mashup, user-generated content mashup, crushed it. Just absolutely crushed it on YouTube. That was pretty low production value. Okay. There's another example I give, and I've got a guide that we can talk about in a little bit that has a lot of YouTube ad examples. But my friend Peter Goodwin from Groove Rings, I'm wearing a silicone wedding ring. He has a video that opens with, it was very simple, but he walks up to the camera and says, hey, have you seen one of these? They're made of silicone and they're called a groove ring. And he kind of squeezes it right by the camera. Yeah. So it was really straightforward. Like there was no special effects. There was no anything, It
was simple.
And it's very simple.
Yeah.
So you can definitely start there. And that's what I recommend you start with. Like, there's a lot of risk in doing Harmon Brothers level production when you don't know if a concept or an angle is going to work. So start with kind of the minimum viable product, see if it works. And then if it works, you can expand upon it and test new openings and test new testimonials and new edits and kind of go from there. So I think it's really smart to start with lower production value. The most important thing is the story, right? Does the story 100%. Hook people? Is it engaging? Is it compelling? Does someone leave watching that video and say, I got to check this out. Like I've got to look a little bit more, and then that does make them want to buy it. And so that's way more important than the production value, the actual story you tell. Yep,
love it. So, could you give one piece of advice for a brand that is considering YouTube? Yeah, that's my question.
So yes, awesome. So a couple things I would say. One, start with remarketing. right? So if you have remarketing audiences, start there, because those are the most likely audiences to convert, right? And that's usually pretty affordable to start with remarketing. So as you're testing your video ideas, you may not see a ton of growth from remarketing, right? If your remarketing audiences are small, but test it there, right? So then if you see good engagement rates and decent conversion rates to a remarketing audience, now you've got a little more confidence to lead into
colder
top of
traffic.
funnel. So that's exactly. So I think that is the number one piece of advice is test with those remarketing audiences or people that have engaged with your brand, and then look to scale from there.
That makes sense. Do you have like a minimum amount you'd recommend someone start testing with per day?
Yeah, it's a great question. So there's a couple things to consider here. We run TrueView for Action campaigns. So that's where you're telling Google, hey, we want to get conversions, and that usually means purchases. So we want to get purchases, and we want to try to get purchases at $50 a piece, right? So CPA of $50. You're still paying for views, right? So Google's still charging you for views, but basically what they're doing is they're trying to find people that convert, and they're doing the math to try to get you to a $50 CPA. So that's great. What Google recommends is if that's your bid, so if you're bidding $50 as your CPA, they recommend your daily budget be 10 to 20x that per campaign.
Sense. To optimize for purchase.
Because the idea is these YouTube audiences are so big. And so Google needs to be experimenting, like what subsets of these audiences are converting, and so they need to experiment. Now, so that's ideal. So then you're looking at, depending on your CPAs, $250 to $500 a day per campaign. But you usually can tell in the first couple of weeks if something has potential. If you're not getting any conversions in the first 3 or 4 days, like you can kill a campaign. There is definitely conversion lag, right? Like people have to see an ad, and it may take a couple days for them to convert. So you don't want to pull the plug too early, but usually you don't need to wait a month, spending $500 a day and it's just you're bleeding money. But that's usually the budget Google recommends. There are some ways around it, but that's a kind of the best rule of thumb.
I like that a lot. Otherwise, if you give it $100, one purchase is all it can do before it kind of stops spending that money, right?
Yeah, and then it's like the algorithm has to go through a learning phase, right? And so if you restrict the budget, it still has to go through the learning phase. So you're really just delaying the timeline, right? And you're maybe not spending as much initially, but you're probably making performance worse initially and just dragging it along. So, I mean, I guess if you can't spend that much per day, then starting at a lower budget,
of course,
can work. But that's ideal. That 10 to 20x your CPA bid.
That's great. And I guess before we wrap it up here, is there anything I should have asked you that I haven't?
Ooh, that's a good question. I like that question. That's a question I need to ask more on my podcast.
Question.
Such a good question. Yeah. So one of the things that I think we need to keep in mind is, what does success look like, and what should you be measuring? And this could be super complex, right? If you start talking to people about attribution and how platforms take credit for conversions, and is Facebook and YouTube taking credit for the same conversion, and what is my true ROI? Like, you start getting into some of this conversation. Pretty complex, right?
Yep.
But I would say a couple of simple things that you need to do. With Facebook lumps in view-through conversions and click-through conversions together as the default. YouTube does not. So YouTube separates out click conversions and view-through conversions. So a view-through conversion is someone that is served your ad, watches a portion of your ad, but they don't click, they convert later.
Yeah.
So you may need to do some custom metrics to combine those two if you want to create an apples to apples comparison of YouTube to Facebook. The other thing you have to watch is if you're pushing hard for top of funnel YouTube, there's going to be a lot of people that see that ad and they don't buy immediately, right? But the next thing they do is they go search for you. So they search for your brand, or they search for a keyword related to your brand. So we always want to layer in viewed video audiences as just audiences of people that have watched your YouTube videos.
Yeah.
We layer those into search and shopping. And we do that because then you can see, oh, okay, well, actually, these YouTube campaigns maybe didn't create a ton of conversions on their own.
Yeah.
But look at how many people are buying from search and shopping that saw it on YouTube first. And then the other thing we look at is like organic lift, right? So maybe now we see a lot more people searching for our brand organically. Well, that doesn't just come out of nowhere, right? They have to see your brand somewhere. So that could have come from YouTube. So some of the reporting you see in Google Ads for YouTube almost underreports a little bit. So you have to look at kind of the total picture. So we want to look at direct conversions, but we also want to look at brand lift and where are we seeing conversions, further down the funnel. So I think measuring it, like what to expect from YouTube and then how do you measure it, it's a really key point to consider. Otherwise, you may be disappointed with your initial results, but actually the results are better than you think they are.
I'm wondering, like, outside of just keeping a pulse on, reporting to clients, because I have an agency as well, not doing what Brett does, but when we report Facebook stats, and again, they're kind of underrated because people also will see a product on Facebook and then Google it and then check out their Instagram, right?
Right.
So how do you do like a proper 360 reporting to paint a bigger picture of what you're doing on YouTube versus just reporting on YouTube?
Yeah. So, I mean, ideally, when we work with a client, we love to manage YouTube and then Google search and shopping and remarketing and all that together. When we do, then we can really piece it together by layering in audiences to other campaigns. You can kind of see where...
And just overlap everything to get it.
Exactly. Yeah. But then, and just to be relatively simple and straightforward for a podcast, one of the other things we look at is, and I first learned this from Ezra Firestone, he's built Boom by Cindy Joseph from nothing to now, I think they did 50 million or something like that. It was huge. They still look at total money in and total money out, right? So they've got, they set targeted performance goals per platform, but then they're also looking at the global numbers, right? Because they know that there's going to be a little bit of crossover, at least a little bit of crossover, right? Where Facebook takes credit for the same conversion that YouTube takes credit for. Right. So then the way you mitigate that is you say, okay, I have to have goals in the platform because that's where we manage the campaigns, is in the platform.
Yeah.
Then I'm gonna have a total money in and total money out goal. So then I know, hey, if in platform things look out of whack, I can make adjustments. But then I can also look at, globally I'm out of whack. So
gotcha.
They're both, my platforms are taking too much credit. So I need to slow down my spend a little bit. And so I think that's a simple-ish way, or a simple way to describe. You got to look at your global performance as well.
Yep.
There are other attribution tools that we've seen, and we're experimenting with lots of different complex models and stuff like that that are really not easy to talk about on a podcast. You kind of need to see visuals, but I think measuring in platform and then looking at the total money in, total money out is like the simplest way to look at it.
I love that a lot. That way you're not going to paint an incorrect picture if YouTube isn't performing, but Facebook is, or vice versa, because it's, again, it's about total in, total out. I like that. My last question is, I know you've got a couple of really awesome resources on your website you're telling me about before we started recording. So if people want to learn more about working with you or even getting started with YouTube/Google, where is a good place to go?
Yep. So the best place is omgcommerce.com. We have blog, podcast is all there. Check it out. YouTube specifically, have a couple of different guides that I recommend. So I mentioned that creating the ad is like the hardest part when it comes to YouTube and the biggest barrier to entry. So we built this resource, built it for ourselves initially, just of top performing YouTube ads. So links to these ads. And then we started kind of categorizing them and giving them names and breaking down why they worked. And so I think this guide now has like 16 or 18 of the top performing YouTube ads. Yep. And then it shows why they work. And then you have a link to the actual ads, so you can check it out. So it's the top YouTube ad templates and examples. It's free. Okay. It's at omgcommerce.com under guides.
Okay.
And then also there, I recommend, for Facebook or YouTube, if your videos can have testimonials in them, they work way better. So there's a guide for how do you get testimonials, right? So how do you, if you're remote, which in most cases we're going to be remote right now, not face-to-face with our customers, how do you create a testimonial video? How do you coach someone into filming a video with their iPhone and sending it to you? Or when the world opens up again fully, or if you can be in person with someone, how do you interview them, how do you ask questions, stuff like that. So there's the guide to authentic video testimonials. And there's other resources like a Google Shopping guide and a few other things if you want to check that out. But yeah, it's all at omgcommerce.com.
Awesome. And guys, we're going to link all that below in the resource area. Be sure to give this video a big thumbs up to thank Brett for taking his time to walk you through YouTube advertising. It's not easy, but he is a guy who gets solid results for e-com brands. So, Brett, thank you for your time today. This has been super insightful.
Thank you. Really fun. You're an awesome podcast host.
Well, there you go.
Thank you. I had lots of fun.
Yeah, thanks so much. And guys, be sure to subscribe to the channel. We do publish content regularly. And hey, if you have another guest that you want to nominate or another topic you want us to cover, please do drop it below in the comments. But apart from that, we'll see you next time.